So this past week was the annual Big Ten spring meetings in the Chicagoland area. Some big highlights to get to from it. And for more on this, we bring in Graham Couch now from the Lansing State Journal. Graham, you were there at the meetings. Let me start with one of the big topics being satellite camps. The NCAA said, no, they're not good. Then a couple weeks later, they said, yes, they are good. So what's the Big Ten stance on them?
Well, it varies, but it seems like people are okay with it. I mean, Jim Delaney seems okay with what Jim Harbaugh has going. I think ultimately there's going to be some sort of regulation, and everybody sort of knows it. And so, however you feel about it this week or this year, you put on a good face and a united front. But most people seem okay with it, and that was kind of the general consensus. But if this were the case a year from now, if nothing is done, I would be interested to see if the responses were the same.
Wasn't just a football discussion, too. Transfer rules were brought up, and this is affecting a lot of teams in the world of basketball as fifth-year graduate transfers are moving on at a rate that gets higher and higher year after year. Does the Big Ten see this as a problem?
Well, the basketball coaches do. And, and they were at these meetings this year, and sometimes for the coaches, there's more griping than actual legislation or anything that's ever going to get done when the basketball coaches are around. But it is an issue. When you look at more than 1,000 this year, more than 700 last year, just the rate of growth, 40% of kids will have transferred by the start of their junior year. That's a pretty incredible rate, and you're much more over the common student rate. So, yeah, I think it is an issue. I think it's something that they see as needing to be addressed. How quickly it will be, how much it becomes a topic, I don't think it's really this year's agenda, but it certainly, you're in an era where kids are transferring at an alarming rate, and they're not sticking around when there's any sort of adversity. And, you want people to be able to move when things aren't going well. People should have the right to transfer, but you also want to encourage an environment that has some kids stick it out through things that aren't really reasons to transfer.
Well, did anyone get into specifics on that? Because I've been trying to figure out, what's the problem with transferring? I mean, coaches can leave whenever they feel like it. Free agency happens in the pros. It's not really a problem. Was there any details as to why they don't like it?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, and they acknowledge that coaches can move and also they don't think it's good for the kids. It's not that it's not the kids' right. It's like one of those things where at a certain point, you have to be helped from yourself a little bit. The graduate transfers is one thing, and I think there's a lot of kids are transferring as graduate transfers, but they are kids who have done their duty sort of the university to themselves. They've graduated. They're older and mature. They can make one more decision for themselves. There's some things that make sense there. But with the undergrad, the number of kids who are going, how do you make it more of a deterrent than sitting out? How do you make sure kids are patient enough to wait for something that may be better where they're at and make sure they're getting the best information? Kids are always going to leave. Kids should be allowed to leave. It's the alarming rate in which it's happening, and is it actually benefiting the kids? And I'm sure some of it is self-serving for these coaches, but on the other side of that, there is at least anecdotally evidence of kids winding up in places where they're no more happy than they would have been if they'd stuck around.
What was discussed in regard to time demands on student athletes?
I would expect legislation to actually follow fairly soon, some sort of proposal that deals with this. And you start to see the 20-hour-a-week rule people kind of want to get rid of, not because they want to overwork the kids, but because there are so many ways around it, and it's not really working. It's not really serving its purpose. They want to take the week and try to break it up and see, there are so many hours a week. How many hours does a kid need for this? How many hours does a kid need for this? Time demands are a big issue because kids have spoken up on this, and it's different in different sports, and they've got to find a way to make it so it's not all-encompassing. Kids aren't injured. Kids aren't losing academic opportunities. I think this is the actual issue that we'll see some change on soon.
Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Thanks for the insight, man. We appreciate it.
Anytime.